voters across Wisconsin were calling in the day of the election and right before the election, relaying stories on Twitter, on Facebook, making phone calls about robocalls they were getting from Scott Walker allies. And those allies were saying, hey, if you've already participated in the recall, if you signed the petition to recall Scott Walker, nice job, good work, that's what we wanted, and you can sit out the election. Your vote has already been recorded.
Yeah. Look, so people are going to get outraged by that. They should. It's illegal, and, they should look into it, they should fix it, etc. I'm not as outraged by it, and I'll tell you why. This is part of politics, right? And this has been part of politics forever, which is cheap shots before an election to try to get the other guys to stay home. Now, look, when you do voter ID laws, etc., and you disenfranchise the voters entirely, that's a whole different ball game, and et cetera. Now, should they do this? Of course not, right? And is it lopsided at this point? Absolutely. Like in the past, would JFK have done this? Apparently, yes, something along these lines, right? And so there are reports about how they, manipulated the voting on the day of, et cetera. Would they have Democrats in the past?
Do you think it's conceivable that Richard Nixon didn't?
Oh, of course he did.
Richard Nixon.
No, but I wrote, the first report I ever wrote, like a major report in, I don't remember, junior high or whatever, was on Watergate. So, and I'll never forget it. Nixon did every dirty trick in the book. He would plant people in his opponents' rallies, and they would say wild and outrageous things, and then he would point to them and go, oh my God, look at what the Hubert Humphrey people think. And I mean, every dirty trick in the book. But maybe that experience has led me to thinking, oh, of course they're going to do these dirty tricks.
Right. And by the way,
you got to plan for them, and you got to plan to get beyond them.
The story on Nixon is that after that, he was like, well, I'm never getting dirty tricked again.
Yeah.
But I don't buy for a second that those guys weren't involved in it then.
Right. So now, look, it's been going on forever. It doesn't mean it should be going on. We should stamp it out, obviously. And then number two is, in the past, honestly, it used to be a lot more even. Democrats would do dirty tricks. They do walking around money to make sure people got out to vote, et cetera. Republicans would do it. Now the Democrats are would never do this.
Well, there's
right?
something for
they could maybe still do walk around money, but they wouldn't do this. So
there's
Republicans
something
do it all the time.
insidious about suppressing the vote that's worse than getting out the vote, than using some sort of dirty trick to get people to vote. And and I see a difference, and there's something un-American about it. Anybody gets to vote. People get to vote ignorantly.
Right.
Right? But discouraging people to vote, telling them not to vote, obviously sort of using anything going back to poll tax or literacy tests, those are crimes. But I would argue that if this were true and this were orchestrated, this is a crime.
Absolutely.
If anybody involved in this, they go to prison. You can't make phone calls to people and tell them their vote's been counted when it hasn't been counted. And if it came from the campaign, and of course it came from the campaign, Scott Walker, a bad guy. Scott Walker's a criminal. We know it. I don't know what the crime is yet, but we'll find it.
They'll love that. Okay. No, but look, here's the thing. Of course I agree with that. But I want to talk about the imbalance a little bit because this explains helps to explain the system that we're in a little bit better now. Because if Democrats did that, the reason they don't do it is because if they did do it, the Republicans would crack their skulls. In the old days, Karl Rove, now whoever, would be Darrell Issa, whatever. They do these investigations. Look at the Democrats stealing the election, stealing and voter fraud and dirty tricks, and they'd indict everybody. There'd be a million subpoenas. They'd get Black Panthers out of nowhere, etc. I mean, they do it when there's no such thing, right?
Well, the Democrats, when Obama was in office and the Democrats had control of the House, look how many Bush administration people that were investigated, and during the Bush administration, even from 06 to 08. I mean, it's investigation after investigation.
And the Democrats don't do it.
They don't do it.
And they're scared. If they went to do an investigation of this,
and those guys committed crimes.
I know, exactly.
Serious crimes.
Right. And if the Democrats go to investigate this, the Republicans will say, oh, look at this. They're politicizing this, which I love. They're politicizing the elections. Okay, right? So that's why we have this imbalance, because we have one party that is massively, unfortunately strong, and another party whose job is to bow their head and get their ass kicked.
And just so we don't think that this is just these rumors, an NBC reporter tweeted that a family friend got the call. And so we'll put up this tweet here from Kiva at Synergy 3K. Kiva says, Dad just emailed a Wisconsin friend of his, if you sign the petition, you don't have to vote tomorrow, robocall. So granted, no, the call hasn't surfaced yet, although that requires someone to record their phone ahead of time, so I understand why there's no record of the call. But again, there were calls happening that night, and this NBC reporter.
I believe it 100%.
I believe it 100%.
You remember the old trick that the Republicans did in one of these elections that we covered, where they said, new rule change, not a big deal. They do it right before the election. Now, Republicans vote on Tuesday, Democrats vote on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Which was my favorite trick of all time.
It's a good one. It's so ballsy.
Yeah. Okay. And I bet you it worked at some percentage of the time, right?
These are close races. It matters.